Most podcast partnerships don't end badly because of creative differences. No, they end that way because nobody talked about money or about ownership or what happens when one person wants out. And by the time that conversation finally does happen, well, usually then it's already too late. So today I'm going to show you why every co hosted podcast needs what I call a podcast prenup, and how not having one can cost you your show, your audience, and your sanity. Hello again. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. I'm an entertainment, media, and business attorney who helps creators to build smarter, safer, more profitable businesses on what they're doing. And if you're co-hosting a podcast or even thinking about taking on or becoming a co-host, this episode could save you from a very expensive mistake. Now, here's what most creators do. They start a podcast with a friend or a colleague or a collaborator of some sort. Everyone's excited. The vibe is good. The ideas are flowing. And so they say, well, we'll figure the details out later. And that right there, that's the mistake, because later comes after the show takes off. It starts making money. The audience grows. The expectations change. So let me paint a very common scenario for you. Two co-hosts launch their show. One is going to handle the editing, the publishing, the promotion, and the other shows up to record, brings their personality, maybe does a little prep work and so on. And at first, it all feels pretty equal. But over time, one person starts feeling like they're the one doing more, and then the money starts coming in. And suddenly the question is, well, why are we splitting this 50-50? Now add on the fact that maybe one of them wants to quit or wants to fire the other or wants to keep the show. Now we're not talking about podcasting anymore. We're talking about ownership dispute, intellectual property rights, control over the podcast feed, access to the audience, access to the accounts, and sometimes it devolves into litigation. Now, here's the truth most creators don't want to hear. If you're working with another person on a podcast, you are not just creating content. You are forming a business relationship. And business relationships need structure, because without structure, assumptions replace agreements, emotions replace logic, and conflict becomes inevitable. And this is the moment where you stop being just a creator and start acting like a business owner. This is where a podcast prenup comes in. It's really just a nickname for a podcast co-host agreement or co-production agreement, or maybe the LLC operating agreement that governs the relationship. Now, here's what it really should cover. First off is ownership. Who owns the podcast name, the content, the RSS feed, the brand? Is it joint ownership, or does one party own it and sort of license it to the other, or just share the revenue with the other? What are the roles and responsibilities? Who's responsible for doing what? Not just the editing, the publishing, the marketing, the booking guests, but also the prep work, the promotion, being out there in public and helping people understand what's going on. Because we'll both do everything really never holds up. Next up, the revenue and expenses. How are we going to split the money? Ad revenue, sponsorships, affiliate income, products, and who's responsible for paying for the costs of the show? Things like hosting, software, production, equipment, all of that kind of stuff. And then what about decision making? Does one party have the final say on the direction of the content, the guests, the monetization, the branding, the business decisions? Because deadlocks are what kill shows faster than anything. And then what about an exit strategy? What happens if someone wants out? Someone stops participating, either voluntarily or because of a disability or because they die, or someone breaches the agreement for one reason or another. Can one party buy out the other? Can they be forced to buy out the other? Does the show get to continue, or does it have to shut down? What happens without this, without an agreement, is that everything defaults to common law principles and unclear ownership, very fact specific, and end up having a trial over these things. Maybe it's equal claims, there's messy disputes, and in many, many cases, whoever controls the access to the accounts really kind of controls the show. Now, that is not a legal strategy. That is a race to the password reset button, and in many cases, it can make more trouble than you would have had otherwise. So let me zoom out on this all for just a second. If your podcast is merely a hobby, well, then none of this really matters very much. But if your podcast is building an audience, generating revenue, creating opportunities for you, then you are building an asset or multiple assets, and assets need protection. This is one of the first steps toward building something bigger, a real business around your content. Now, if you want a simple way to get this handled the right way, I've got you covered. First off, you could grab a professionally drafted podcast prenup, a co host agreement template, over at podcastlawforms.com. But if you want some help figuring out what you need to do and how it's going to work out, I have a planning guide for the podcast prenup. If you go to podcastprenup.com, you can access that, download it for free. It'll help you have that conversation that'll help you prepare the agreement early on so you don't have the trouble down the line when something's gone wrong. And if you want help tailoring your podcast prenup to your specific situation, you can, of course, book a strategy call with me. You can go to firemark.com/consult20, that's consult 20, and book a free Zoom or a telephone call. Now, next time we are talking about brand deals and the biggest mistakes that podcasters make when working with sponsors, because getting paid is great and all, and getting promises to get paid is great, but actually getting paid the wrong way or not at all can cost you a lot more than you think. So that's it for this episode of Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, urging you to keep on podcasting, stay active, stay involved, and take care of yourself so that you can keep your message out there for impact, influence, and income. I'll see you again real soon.